Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lillian Lodge Copenhaver, Executive Director of the Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here in the College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. I am pleased to welcome you to our leadership webinar series this afternoon. The mission of our center is to empower young women professionals and academics in all of the fields of communication to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their professions and in their communities. Our webinar topic this afternoon is Who Are You? Creating Your Personal Brand. No matter what career path you take, you have to brand yourself. So our webinar speaker today will tell you just how to do that. Gina Carriazo Hickey has a passion for building brands. She currently serves as the director at the Bowden Agency here in Miami. Hickey has more than 20 years of experience in brand development and management, public relations and corporate communications, social media, and marketing. Her experience also includes serving as public relations director and regional brand lead for Starwood Latin America. While at Starwood, she developed communications, social media, and experiential strategies for the company's multiple global brands. She also spent more than a decade as client lead for multinational corporations such as Visa, HBO, Sony, and Nextel at Edelman and BCW. She most recently spent her time developing a successful tech ed startup in Miami as the founding partner of HackSack. And she is also one of our graduates, so we are very proud of her. I'm pleased to present to you Gina Carriazo Hickey.
Thank you so much, Lillian. It's so great to be here. As Lillian said, I am an FIU graduate. And as I was pulling up to the parking lot and walking through the hallways, I was like, oh my gosh, it's been so long. It's literally been 20 years, which makes me feel really old. But it's just really, really wonderful to be here and to be able to share with you guys a nugget of personal branding. And hopefully you guys will be walking away from here with some tools in order to start working on your personal brand. So interestingly enough, and I was speaking with Lillian earlier, one of the things that has been super important in my career, I learned here at FIU while I was a student just like you guys. So I had the pleasure of being a student of Professor Bill Adams, who many of you may know was the former dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Comms. And he said a phrase that has stuck with me throughout my career, and that is performance before publicity. And I'm sure that you have heard that before. And that's a concept that's super important as brands are built, whether it is a corporate brand, a lifestyle brand, a product brand, even a celebrity brand. Performance before publicity is something that we should all sort of have in the back of our minds. And why? Because it's about credibility. So at the end of the day, if you can't back it up, people just simply won't believe it. So as we think about branding overall, that's a concept that is really important. As we think about personal branding, it becomes even more important because it's credibility for yourselves as you begin your careers and begin to launch your paths. So let's talk a little bit about brands. And I want to make sure, you guys are all comm students, so I'm pretty sure you guys know what a brand is. But what is a brand to you guys? Anybody have an idea?
It's basically which how people see, your company, and they call it the feelings, emotions that they experience when they see a logo of the company.
Yep, for sure. Anybody else? Yep. Yep. Yep, absolutely. So when I looked for a definition of brand, the thing that comes up is, it's the company's symbol or identity, basically what defines a product from another product, right? So that's like the basic definition. But I think what you said is much more correct especially in this day and age, because a brand is much more than just a logo or an identity. It's really about how people, consumers, perceive an organization or a company or a product. And it's the way that a brand makes them feel. It's the way that they engage with them, right? So has anybody here heard the phrase, corporations are people? Okay, so the reason why they say corporations are people is because corporations, from like a tax perspective and in government, they're kind of treated like people, right? And recently I've heard the phrase that people are corporations. So that's kind of an interesting twist on, you know, the whole idea of how corporations and people intertwine. And I think that's a really interesting concept. I'm not sure that I agree that people are corporations, but I definitely think that everyone has a personal brand. So we can start sort of from that concept and say, you know, we all have a personal brand. And here's the thing, you're either going to design and craft your own brand, or people and the people that you interact with are going to craft it for you, right? So it's important as you're going through your career to take the time to sort of define what that brand is in all of your engagements, so that that way, when you leave a room or when you leave a job interview, people have engaged with your brand and you have put some meaning behind it. All right, so can you guys give me an example of someone who you think has developed a great personal brand? Yes. Nike? But more of a personal brand. Yeah, a personal brand. Yes. Okay. Yeah, for sure. That's a very... Oh, okay. So you said the Kardashians, absolutely. They have developed a personal brand and, you know, lifestyle brands and product brands around their personal brand. Yes. Okay, that's a great example. I couldn't really hear. Like I can't, can you repeat that? The Obamas, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Michael Jordan and LeBron James, for sure. Beyonce, absolutely. These are all fantastic examples. I think, you know, when I think of personal brands, and the brands that you guys mentioned are definitely included, you know, I think of people like Greta Thunberg, I think about Oprah Winfrey, I think about Elon Musk. And of course, you know, these are people who are doing amazing things. You know, some people call them unicorns, right? Because they're one in a million. But the interesting thing is that they all have things that are common. And the Obamas and Michael Jordan and, you know, all of these great personal brands have this in common as well. So the first thing is they know what they stand for, right? So no one can argue that Greta Thunberg, she's an advocate for climate change. There is no room for argument there. Elon Musk, his mission is to get humans into Mars and make humans interplanetary. Have you guys heard that before? Mm-hmm. So again, it's really important to define what you stand for, right? That's the number one thing. And the people that have been able to put together successful personal brands can do that. They also have a story, right? There's a story behind their brands. So in the case of Oprah, you know, we know she came from humble beginnings. We know she had a lot of personal struggles in her life, and that makes her success even more remarkable. For someone like Elon Musk, you know, his companies, SpaceX and Tesla, at one point were going to go bankrupt. And he risked his personal fortune to, you know, move them forward. That's part of his narrative. He tells that story all the time. And why does he do that? Because it makes him relatable, right? It makes people think, okay, no, he's human. I can relate to this person. And it makes him, you know, accessible. They have a proven track record, right? So even though these are pretty lofty aspirations, they have the track record to back it up. So Greta Thunberg is out there, you know, talking about climate change, and she has a lot of opponents, but she doesn't give up, right? Elon Musk, you know, he continues on his quest, even though, you know, there's been times that people have questioned if this is even possible. You know, sending his Tesla into space was sort of like a stunt. He got some criticism for that, but at the end of the day, they're proving that what their bold aspiration is something that is actually attainable. The other thing is that they have failed, right? So although these are great personal brands, there's been moments where, you know, they haven't been successful. The Oprah Network, you know, even some of the partnerships that she's done haven't been completely well received, but that's okay. It shows that, you know, even the best personal brands at some point or other have failed. The other thing is that they really engage with their consumers. So, you know, in some cases, they engage so much that they get in trouble for it. So Elon Musk, you know, he's on Twitter a lot. He tweets back at people that, that follow him, even if they're just consumers. And he's very open, and that has gotten him in some trouble. He was actually fined $20 million by the SEC because of things he said that he wasn't supposed to, but he stuck to his guns. And, you know, Oprah has put herself out there, you know, engaging in people's lives. The bottom line is that they're really connected to their audiences, and they're open. And so that helps the personal brand be well-rounded in a sense that these are not people who are just, you know, in a vacuum, but they're part of a certain connection with their audience. And the last thing is that they evolve, right? So personal brands, just like products, just like companies, they evolve. So, you know, whether they start at one place, they're not going to be the same now as they are in 10 years. You know, the Oprah that I knew growing up is very different from the Oprah that we see now. Greta Thunberg is going to be, you know, another person in 10 years. So it's really important to understand that personal brands evolve. So I'll stop here just to see if there's any questions or any comments, because, you know, I don't want to sit up here talking the whole time. So any questions or comments?
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
These young people who are sitting here are just starting out.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting ready to go out to the world and make a brand for themselves and make a name for themselves. What would you advise them to start? Where they are now? What should they be doing?
That's a great question. So I have an answer for that. And so I've outlined a couple of points that I think are good takeaways, because even though these people that I mentioned, you know, are change makers, they don't seem very relatable. The reality is that everything that they've done are things that you guys can do today, that I've done in the past, and that I continue to do every day, because as I said, brands evolve. Okay, so the first thing is, one, define what you stand for, right? Define your focus. What is that one thing that you want your consumers, right, or your audiences to know about you? So, you know, for example, you know, in my case, when I started out, I knew that I wanted to be a successful public relations executive. That was how I branded myself. Every conversation that I had, every job interview that I had, I always wanted to portray that image to the person that I was relating to. So, you know, it's important to start there. Just start with what is your initial goal. And then to tell your story, right? This is something that is super important, because we all have a story. Even if our story is vanilla, it's still a good story. The important thing is to be authentic and to be truthful with your story, because at the end of the day, people are going to remember that you were transparent, that you were honest, and that you were trustworthy. So the only rule there is to be real, but don't worry if your story is not super interesting, right? Because that's not what's important. Your track record, right? So all of the things that you're doing, start documenting those things. You know, in terms of, you know, you guys got accepted into FIU, you guys are here, you guys are tracking your career. That's an accomplishment. And that's something that you should be communicating, you know, definitely in terms of, you know, creating a LinkedIn profile and already starting to put those accomplishments in a place where they can be found. That's important. But you need to keep, you know, track of your track record and the accomplishments that you've made. Your communications. Okay, so this is important. This goes back to, you know, your LinkedIn profile, but this has to do with everything that you communicate. You guys are super fortunate because you have social media and you have LinkedIn. You know, back when I graduated, we didn't have any of that stuff. So it was really more of like word of mouth and the people that you met face to face. So you obviously have, you know, a smaller audience, right? But with you guys, you have the opportunity to use all of these social media channels to communicate who you are, and what your personal brand is all about. And of course, that comes with the flip side, right? That everything that you do on social media is either going to strengthen your brand and solidify your brand, or it's not, right? So as you think about those engagements, it's important to always have that top of mind, you know, that your digital footprint at the end of the day is going to be what backs up your personal brand philosophy. And the last point is your network. Okay, this is again, things that you can start doing right now as you think about your personal brand. Everyone who you engage with, you know, right now it's your professors, it's your peers, everyone who you engage with is actually engaging with your personal brand, right? So the way you make people feel after a conversation, the perception that they have of you, that is all part of your personal brand. As you expand your network in your career, that's going to be, you know, your mentors, your supervisors, your colleagues. These are all your brand consumers, right? That's kind of the easiest way that I could put it. All of these people are engaging with you and they are going to advocate for you, support you, recommend you, or the opposite, you know, depending on, you know, how you establish your personal brand. So use that as an opportunity. I can't stress enough how important it is to take care of your network. It's the same concept as taking care of your customers for corporations or of consumers for brands, because taking the time to write that thank you note, taking the time to send those emails, to keep up with your network, that's super important, because when your name comes up or when an opportunity comes up, they're going to remember, hey, this person that I met, you know, really made an impact on me, and I'm going to call them for this particular opportunity. So again, that's something that you can start doing right now, and it's all part of building your personal brand. Okay? Yes.
I know you said networking is important, which we do, both of you. But how do you maintain the network? Like, what tips do you have, especially if the person you're networking with doesn't necessarily have all the things that you're interested in or can help you out in specific ways you would like it? Like, how do you keep that going?
Right. So the question is, you know, we all know that networking is important, but how do you keep up with your network? Okay, so there's a couple of things. One, you know, LinkedIn is super useful because it's a way where anytime you meet someone, you look for them on LinkedIn, you connect with them on LinkedIn, and you keep that conversation going. Here's the thing about networking. When you go and you meet someone and you automatically try to sell something, or you try to position yourself in a way that's very like forward, it kind of takes people back. What you want to do is you want to establish a relationship with that person. And the way you do that is by really connecting and keeping in touch, and maybe sending an article that, you know, you found interesting, or, you know, again, you know, connecting on some deeper level that's not just trying to sell yourself, right? Because I think people can see right through that. The other way is, you know, like I said, when you meet someone, follow up. You know, send an email and say, hey, it was great to meet you. You know, this is what I'm up to. And then, you know, reconnect 30 days later. Keep the conversation going if it's someone who is really important to your network. But I think at the end of the day, the networking that's done at events, right? It's sort of that networking that you don't really know if that's going to pay off. The network thing that's more important is the one that you do on a daily basis with your clients, with your vendors, with your colleagues, with the people who are around you, because they're the ones that are seeing you every day. It's not just about going to an event and meeting somebody and hoping to get something out of it. I see 2 hands up.
So who was your hardest account, and how did you like manage to like get them like a successful campaign, if that makes sense?
Yes. Okay. So this is an interesting question. I'm going to try to tie it into personal branding. But I think, you know, in terms of accounts, you know, all accounts are challenging. I think, you know, in my particular role, you know, it was always working with multinational corporations operating in Latin America. So I think the challenge was, you know, being able to work as a team, and, you know, when you were remote, right? and also helping the client understand strategies that were regional but also applicable in each different market. So that's kind of a, a general answer to your question. In terms of personal branding, I think that what's important for your clients is, for them to have a clear understanding of, how you are impacting and helping, their communications move forward, right? So as you think about branding yourself, if you're going to work in an agency or as a client leader, is to be able to, be someone who is having an impact, someone who's strategic, positioning yourself that way. If client route is the way that you're interested in going. Yes.
We have a virtual question from one of our participants online. How do you start a personal brand or business without much credibility? Haven't worked at a huge company, no masters, etc.
That is a great question too. Okay, so about 4 years ago, I was working at Starwood, and there was a merger, and then I wasn't working at Starwood anymore. So I actually decided to launch a business called Hack Shack. And it's a business that is in a completely different area that I was an expert in. It is a business that's targeted towards children. It's about coding, robotics, and design. It's not something that I had knowledge in, but it was something that my partner was very passionate about. And I brought in all of the marketing and communications expertise. The way you build credibility is the same way. I mean, it's pretty much applicable across the board. It's in the work. It's in the performance, right? It's in doing things the right way. It's about what I said in the beginning, performance before publicity, right? So as you're starting out, there are certain things that you can do. You can build on your expertise. You can become an expert in the area that, you're starting your business or you're starting your career. But no one is going to expect you, especially at the beginning, to have all of the answers. They are expecting you to deliver on the promises that you're making and to actually do the work.
We have another question from our virtual audience. Jennifer asked, social media has become such a great tool for personal branding. Do you think we're forgetting to utilize different types of tools, perhaps something more traditional?
I think social media is so important. And I think it's such a great, it's such a great invention for personal branding because it's a way to convey your brand every day and reach big audiences. But at the end of the day, the personal connections are what's going to make a difference. I have seen, many businesses that are really successful on social, but are not necessarily making the numbers. So absolutely, there has to be a balance between the two. I think nothing beats the real world, right? Nothing beats being at the office or at the studio or at your business or in your client's place and doing the personal interaction. But social media is important too. So I really think it's a balance. I think they're both right up there. I think we shouldn't forget traditional avenues, but I think social media is equally important.
We have another question from Kathy. What happens if you have a strong personal brand and work within a company, but your personal brand can sometimes be an issue for the company you work for?
Ooh, that is a great question. And I actually had that as, so in addition to my points before, I wanted to kind of just give you guys some warnings about, things to look out for as you're building your personal brand. And this was actually one of them. So your personal brand is something that you're going to carry with you everywhere, right? And as part of it, you have your personal goals, right? It's important to remember you have your personal goals, but then you have your professional development goals, right? And here's the thing, your personal brand is an individual affair, okay? Your professional goals is not, because whether you're starting a company or whether you're joining a company, it's a collaborative effort, right? So in order for you to grow, your peers have to grow, your company has to grow. So I think the interesting thing is, yes, keep a focus on your personal brand. It's super important. But as you join, the workforce and you join a company or you start your own company, don't forget that business is not done in a vacuum. There's a whole sort of team and collaboration that you have to take into account. Any other questions? All right, good. So this is actually a great segue because that was one of my points as you guys go on this journey of developing your personal brand. The other three that I had sort of jotted down was, be prepared to fail. It's part of the process. Some things are going to work out, some things are not. Somebody's failing right now, right? So the sooner that we remember and understand that failing is a part of learning, the faster we can get over it. So yes, take your minute to cry and be upset, but get over it, stand up, and there is no instant brand. Okay, so this kind of goes back to the question, how do you create this brand without credibility? Well, none of the brands that we know and love without credibility. They started maybe with no funding and they worked their way. So a brand that you know and love today probably started 10 years ago in somebody's kitchen, coming up with the idea and putting everything together. And then 10 years later, you love it and you think, oh, look at this new brand. Well, it probably was not that new for the people who started it. So it's important to remember that nothing happens overnight. And the last thing is imposter syndrome. Have you guys heard of this concept? Okay. And this is especially true for women. I think as we sort of start our careers, we're very confident. And then, as, we progress, sometimes, we question, oh my God, how did I get here? What am I doing here? It's important to understand that in business and in life, nothing is really given to you, right? So everything that you are able to do, it's because you've worked hard for it. And it's important to remember that. Because there are moments of doubt in everybody's career, but it's important not to fall for the trap and remind yourself that you got here to be in that seat because you worked hard and you got into this great university, and you're going to get that great job and you're going to get all those great opportunities because you worked hard for them. So that was sort of like just to give you some sort of like flags of things to watch out for as you're building your brand and as you guys start your career. So this is kind of my wrap up. I'm glad that we're going along and starting questions, but there'll be opportunity for questions after. So why do you guys think it's important to have a personal brand? Like if you go through all of this to craft and to create it, like what's the point? Any ideas?
Even niche to yourself.
Yeah.
Basically, use an idea to the person who's watching you or who you were networking with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If I can say there's one thing about personal branding is that it enables opportunity to find you. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, over the track of my career, as I told you guys before, I wanted to be successful public relations executive. And I worked very hard to do that, throughout my whole career. And it got to the point where Starwood recruited me. One day I got a call and said, hey, we want to talk to you. It doesn't mean that I didn't have to work my butt off during the interview, but it just meant that I did not go looking for the opportunity. Okay. And it's the same thing that has been happening in my career since. Opportunity has been able to find me because I have created a personal brand in my network, right? And that's, I think in a nutshell, that's what this is all about. You want opportunity to find you, and that's the fastest track there. Was there a question?
Martin asked, how do you unstuck yourself or reignite the spark when you hit a wall, where no matter how much you reach out to people, you don't hear back? And how to hear back from people and it feels like the train has left you behind?
Okay. So, again, I think we've all been there, right? If you really think about it, most of us have had an experience where a door has closed. I think at the end of the day, it's about not giving up. You have to get up and you have to keep trying and, hit that wall a couple of times because eventually you're going to break through. At the same time, if you're not breaking through, then maybe it's time to rethink your strategy and open other doors and try to catch other trains, right? So yeah, I think, again, it goes back to learning to fail and learning to get up and trying harder the next time.
Can I ask, how did you personally brand yourself
Mhm. So, okay, so this goes back to the interactions that you have throughout your career, right? So it actually happened because one of my previous colleagues, who then became a client, recommended me, right? So here's the thing. I had worked with this person at the agency for many years. You know, we were colleagues, we worked together. Then she went to be on the client side and I was supporting her. And then when they called her and she was like, oh, you know what? I have the perfect person for you. Then they called me. So again, it's not something that happened overnight. I was at my first agency for 8 years and was her client she was my client for probably 3 years. So this took like, 10 years in the making type of thing. But that's how it happens. It's not an instant thing, but that's how opportunity found me. It was in the interactions that I had with her as a worker, as a coworker, and then as my client. Yes.
Kathy asked, which personal brands do you follow? You mentioned mega personal brands, but who do you listen to?
So I have a couple of people that I follow. One is her Twitter handle is Miss Internet, MISS Internet. She was actually my first boss and is my mentor to this day. Her name is Miss Internet because she's a tech entrepreneur. And she has actually broken a lot of glass ceilings, securing a lot of funding for her company. So she's someone that I admire, who has created an amazing personal brand for herself. And the other one that I follow that's more like a personal thing is called Bird's Papaya. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but she's all about female empowerment and body positivity and that kind of stuff. She's like my fun personal brand that I enjoy very much. Yes.
On the note that you just mentioned, how do you find mentors and develop a relationship with them?
So again, I mean, this goes back to your network, people that touch you. So, I think, when you're in college, right? Like, and you're not out there working yet, it's sort of hard to say, okay, my supervisor is going to be my mentor, right? But you have so much opportunity with your professors, with people who come to speak and, be able to, create that connection with them. Mentorship sort of happens, when you're in the trenches and you identify someone who you admire and want to continue working with. I think it's more difficult to say, okay, I like what this person is doing. I'm going to reach out to them so they can become my mentor. That's sort of like a forced relationship, which I don't think really works. But for example, joining organizations that are relevant for you. I mean, there's a ton of women led organizations in Miami that are super helpful. You can find something, there's women in business, women in technology, entrepreneurs, like there's just a vast amount of organizations that you can tap into and, become a member of those organizations, go to their talks, and see until you can find the place where the content that is being given and developed makes sense for you. And then, that's how you sort of establish those connections. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's not something that will happen at an event. It's something that will happen when you put the time in to become part of a community or of something that's deeper than just one-off events. Does that make sense? All right.
I have one further comment. So many of you are going to be going out for that first job. And what would you recommend to them as far as their personal brand is concerned when they go in for that job interview? You got the interview. Finally, this is good. You're going in there. What should they be doing to put themselves forward as a personal brand to that interviewer so they make that cut or they get that job?
So be authentic, okay? Be real, because the truth of the matter is that you guys are going to be in the room competing with other graduates from great schools that are going to have very similar resumes, if you will. But what's going to come through is who you are, right? And especially in this day and age, there's a whole sort of area of diversity and inclusion in companies and in corporate America today. And, that's what's valued the most. Companies and organizations want people who are going to bring something to the table that they're not going to find anywhere else. And it's important to become, part of that organization. But what you bring in, that's something that you can only do. So what I would say is, your resumes are all going to be great. Your profiles on LinkedIn are going to be polished, and you guys are going to think through all of that. But when you get to the room, it's all about being who you are and being real, because that is what, when you leave the room, that's what they're going to remember, and I think that's sort of the most important thing. Be real, because everyone can kind of cut through the clutter now, right? Like, when something is fake. You can tell. Yeah.
Also, good advice to research the company that you're going to be working for, because if you know what the company is about,
Yes.
you may want to work for that company or not.
Absolutely. But we're talking about, yeah, 100%. I was answering the question in terms of personal branding. In terms of, from a human resources perspective, and as you go on the job hunt, obviously you have to, follow all the steps. What I said before is applicable to this too. I got the opportunity, but I didn't get the job because of my personal brand, right? I had to go in there and do all of that, do the research, make sure that I understood the job description, practice my interview, all of those things. So your personal brand is going to get you through the door, right? It's going to help you in the interview. You have to do the legwork, but your personal brand is how you come across in all of this, because you can have the research, you can have, the job description, you can have the experience, but if your personal brand doesn't fit the company brand, then it's probably not going to work out. All right. My second point. Okay, so if you don't define your brand, someone else is going to do it for you, right? Because the perception is going to remain regardless. So remember what I said in the beginning, that everyone has a personal brand by design or by default? That's what this means. So you're either going to think about it, write down your goal, write down your truth, write down your track record, write down what you want to communicate. You're going to take care of your network, or you're not, and you're simply going to let others do that for you. Now, obviously, I think that, taking the time to do it and do it in a meaningful way really goes a long way. And finally, because if you take the time to create your personal brand, then that means that you're going the extra mile. And the extra mile is never crowded, right? So right now, everything is crowded. Media is crowded, the marketplace is crowded, the job market is crowded. So this is going to help you stand out from other candidates. And it just gives you a competitive edge, which I think, is really important. It was important back then, it's important now. So that's why, creating a personal brand is so important. Okay, so that was my part of the upfront. I'm so happy you guys ask questions throughout, but I'm happy to take more questions. Yes.
Which journalists do you think have an excellent personal brand, and why?
That is a great question. Let's see. So, I worked a lot in the technology space. So Rochelle Broder Singer, she's a local journalist, someone that I follow, and I think has a great personal brand. At the national level, so many come to mind. And I don't want to get into media per se, but I would say Anderson Cooper is one of my favorites. I think his personal brand it goes beyond journalism. So those would be my pick. Someone at the national level and someone at the also, if I go into the Hispanic side, like Ismael Cala from CNN also comes to mind. And I can go on and on.
What makes them so good?
Well, I think that they have become more than journalists, right? So they are people who are really sort of having an effect on society as a whole. So it's not just, telling the story, but bringing in their perspective and being able to connect with their audiences at a deeper level. Yes.
So asking, you have your own company or a boss. So let's say you're into it. realize, okay, this is considered their personal brand, and because of that,
Okay.
you know, for us for an interview, how exactly can we portray our personal brand without being over the top, I guess.
Right. Okay, so the question was, how do you sort of make your personal brand come across in an interview when there are candidates that are more qualified or come from a better school? You know, so I think when you go out and you know and look for a position, you know, you should make sure you have the qualifications, right? So right off the bat, you're sort of starting from a level playing field. You know, the school thing, you know, obviously that kind of stuff comes up. But I think when it comes to personal brand, again, it comes down to like, what is your style, right? Like how, you know, and what the person is looking for. So for some particular opportunities, you're looking for someone who fits with the brand that they're interviewing for, you know? So I think that's important. Aligning your personal brand with the brand that you are trying to be a part of. That's important, right? Because if you're someone who is, you know, into music, but then, you know, you apply for, you know, a job in sports, I mean, like there should be a connection between your own brand and the company that you're applying for. So I think that when you can establish that during an interview, that sets you apart. You know, I'm here not just because I want this job. I'm actually here because I identify with your brand, because I you know, I have an emotional connection and I want to be a part of it. It goes sort of beyond the traditional qualifications. Does that answer? Any other questions? How are we doing with time? Are we good?
Well, thank you very much.
You're very well.
I hope that every one of you will think about everything that you've heard this afternoon. It's so important for those of you who are starting out in your careers to develop a brand. It really is. You need to be someone, and you need to be able to put that forward when you go out for that interview or when you're out networking with folks. You need to be who you are, and you need to put yourself out there. I think that's what we're hearing.
Yep.
You know, sometimes we're more reticent. You know, we kind of hold back. Can't do that when you're out in the field, particularly a field of communications, which most of us are in. You need to put yourselves out there and be as successful as you can be. You need to develop that brand. So hopefully you will all go home and think about this and think about who you are and how you want to be perceived. What you want to be looked at by other people when they see you. What do they think? And networking is important, which, you know, our speaker today has made very, very evident, that you need to get yourself out there, talk to people, and develop networks, develop contacts, let people know who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up quite nicely.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
So for those of us in election 2020, we have actually a special course this semester just on the election. Are you working with any candidates?
No, I'm not in political public relations. No.
We're having Michael Buckley come talk to us, so that should be fun.
You can't get anybody better with a personal brand than Michael Buckley.
Yeah, talk about a local TV brand. Absolutely. So we'll go back to the chat group and we'll see you in there. There's some housekeeping to do before our guests arrive.
Thank you all for coming.